The indictment of former Governor Rod Blagojevich has brought to light some interesting details about his dealings with White House Chief of Staff Rom Emmanuel.
Joining us to give us some more insight is defense attorney Thomas Glasgow, and of course saw this coming out Friday. You know, when we saw the indictment, we saw that Rom's name was mentioned as the person that he was trying to extort for some cash, and this happened back in 2006. Why are we hearing about it now for the first time?
I think it was part of one of the larger federal investigations. You didn't hear about almost anything. They had ramped up their investigation of Governor Blagojevich in 2004. In 2006, this is alleged to have happened, and you didn't hear about the complaint until 2008, which is probably why you didn't hear anything about this particular allegation until they were complete with their investigation.
This isn't good to have the Chief of Staff mentioned in these indictment papers.
No, it could go both ways. I mean, you could end up with him being a defendant, and he's not accused of any wrongdoing right now, but if he were charged, that would be incredibly embarrassing for some wrongdoing that they may allege, or if he's chosen to testify in the case for Mr. Blagojevich.
Yeah, would he be? That's the big question, I think, right now. Is he going to be called to the stand given his stature, given his stance right now in the Obama administration? Would he perjure himself if he were to take the stand?
I don't understand what you're talking about with regard to perjuring himself.
Well, I mean, is he going to talk right now? Because some say he might not talk because what happens if he, was involved or if he knew?
Well, the question really is two things. Number one, did he know what was going on? And soliciting funds or trying to get funds for your district is what legislators do. The question is whether or not he got quid pro quo for that. In other words, the allegation is that in exchange for the $2 million that we already had in the state budget, if you don't throw a fundraiser for us, if your brother, who is an agent, doesn't throw a fundraiser for us, we're not going to give you the money, we're going to hold it up. It was the same allegations against Children's Hospital. So in this situation, it's a question of whether or not that quid pro quo request ever got to him. There's also a question as to whether or not his staff ever got to, Blagojevich's staff ever got to Emmanuel in order to ask him that question.
You're a defense attorney, okay? Rom comes to you and says, I need your representation here. I don't know what to do. What is your recommendation here? Just the mere mention of his name is not a good thing. I think people are going to, you don't want that association, that's for sure.
Agreed, because it ties it directly to the president and it tarnishes the presidency. But the fact is that we're here in Illinois. All these people at some time work together in the political realm in order to facilitate government. And the first thing you want to do is talk to him and find out what exactly went on. What did you know? If you did know anything, did you cooperate with the federal government and tell him, what was going on? If he did cooperate, and we don't know that he wasn't, then I don't think there's any issue here.
Will he be called to testify?
He could be called to testify. He could be called to testify to say, hey, look, I was approached by Mr. Blagojevich, by his agents, and they told me to have my brother have some kind of fundraiser with all these stars, and I said, no, I'm not going to do it.
Let's turn to Rod Blagojevich. He was down in Orlando enjoying himself with the families, for sure, while the indictments are coming down. Where does this go from here? Does he come in now and start naming names?
Well, Blagojevich is the target of the investigation. He's the center of the web. The federal investigation generally goes towards the center and the largest group. Unless they're looking for someone bigger than Blagojevich, they're not going to be looking to have him flip or turn around and name names. The people that are surrounding him in the indictment, his advisors, the lobbyists, etc., are more likely to flip and work for the government and then name names and testify against him in exchange for some kind of consideration in their plea of guilty.
Okay. All right. Everyone's talking about it right now. I mean, obviously we mentioned this before, not good to have the Chief of Staff named in this. And also, why wasn't this brought out in 2006?
Because the investigation was still going on. If you've got a long-term investigation of this nature, you're not going to bring this stuff out if this is part of a bigger investigation. So you've got plenty of time on your statute of limitations.
So this wasn't enough back in 2006 then? Well, it wasn't enough that he asked money from, allegedly asked money from Rom Emmanuel. That wasn't enough back then?
Well, when you're building a bigger case, you want to make sure that if you do this one time, you may have an excuse, Jan, but if you do it 50 times, it's a little harder to make that excuse of, oh, it was just a mistake, or oh, it was a misunderstanding. So I think that's what the government is trying to build here and show a pattern of abuse with Children's Memorial, with the Tribune, with Rom Emmanuel, and it makes a much more powerful case when you've got several things that you're indicting them for as opposed to just that one. And the senator coming up, when you trade the senatorship for, political favors or, the big criminal activity, that's when the U.S. attorney stepped in, said, look, we can't have you taint the United States government by doing this. And that's why they came in and filed a complaint when they did.
Okay.
All right, Thomas Glasgow, defense attorney, thanks for coming in this morning. We appreciate it. Coming up, we're going to have the